and everything. So good. You're looking grand. And I can't believe you got magic slippers, and you've got such a good sense of color, because the shoes match the thing, and you got the. It's so good to see you. Welcome.
I know Edgar Mitchell. I was dressed like this for Edgar Mitchell, and he said he thought I was a bishop.
Oh, right. Yes, right.
And I am. So I figured, well,
Okay, good.
If that's all it takes to be a bishop.
Yeah, right. Welcome very much to Conversation. Pleasure to welcome to the program Nita Renfrew, one of the most stalwart members of those who've been members of our guest list on Conversations. One of the very smartest people in the whole wide universe, in my estimation. And she's made a lot of changes and so forth. We're going to be talking about some of those. Nita, welcome once again to Conversations. It's so good to see you. It's been too long.
Well, it's great to see you, Harold.
Okay, now, you have gotten from where you were very politically organized and very interested, wrote a very interesting book on Saddam Hussein. You were doing all kinds of things. And then lately you've become very interested in healing and Reiki and all that sort of thing. And you just now had a meeting with where the man said you look like a bishop, and that was the one with Mr. Mitchell.
That was
right?
Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut.
That was just this last week from the time we talked.
That's right.
So let's talk about that.
It was on Holy Saturday.
Holy Saturday, okay. Now, what were you doing at a meeting with Mr. Mitchell?
Well, I went to hear him talk.
Maybe you should introduce who he was to the audience.
Edgar Mitchell was the 6th astronaut to walk on the moon.
Right, very few people have done that.
Yeah. And actually, it was, I went there to hear Colin Andrews talk about crop circles. And Edgar Mitchell was part of this meeting. And I didn't really expect, I thought, well, Edgar Mitchell was an astronaut, so therefore he's interesting. But I didn't expect him to say anything interesting.
He's with Noetic Science.
Yeah, he's the head of the, he started the Institute of Noetic Sciences.
Yeah.
And I was just blown away.
Well, right, by him.
By him.
Okay.
And what he said, he was so down to earth. And what I liked what he did, he focused, he sort of brought all of the New Age discourse out of the psychobabble realm.
There's a lot of psychobabble
around that. Sometimes it gets really, really flaky and really, and I fall into that sometimes too. So I'm not,
I think we're all
overly self-righteous.
The times are such where those kind of longings are so strong.
Well, we're looking, we're looking for solutions because everything appears to be collapsing.
Yeah, okay, and we all sense that there's a great opportunity, and it's a time. So you had this woman, Susan. I forgot to send it to you. Susan Boyle became the largest.
Yeah, no, you didn't send it to me.
Yeah, it was very interesting. But go ahead. Yeah.
So anyway, I went there, because I'm interested in the crop circles, and Colin Andrews is one of the first people who did all the research, and then he sort of went through a phase where he said, no, it's mostly hoaxers doing it, but now he's come to the conclusion that even the people who are that at least 20% of them are not made by humans, and that the ones that are made by humans are still being guided by something. Okay,
let's run down.
But anyway,
let's look at that for a minute before we get to Mitchell. The crop circles, and share that. Some people won't know what they are, and then what does it mean, possibly, in terms of the evolution of affairs in this universe? These crop circle things, and what are they connoting, possibly? Or what is being suggested by some of our New Age contemporaries?
Well, the reason I'm interested in them is because I'm a Grail healer. I follow the path of the Grail, the Holy Grail, and those are the energies I work with.
Okay.
And I just want to couch this so that I can put the rest into this context,
okay,
which I know is something that you're not interested in.
Well, I don't know. I'm interested in everything. There's nothing that I'm not interested in.
You're only interested in economics.
No, I just think that's the crucial thing. But anyway, yeah.
So anyway, the Scythian, the Grail, it turns out, it's the word Grail is a Mongolian word, so it probably traces back to earlier than that.
Okay.
It doesn't originate in Europe. It doesn't originate with Jesus Christ, even though the Cup of the Last Supper is a manifestation of the Grail. There's no doubt about that. But the Grail is in Mongolian. It's the Sung Grail. Sung means invocation, and Graal, or Grel, means source or light. So it's really a ceremony of the invocation to the light or to the source.
From the Scythians?
Well, it goes back to Central Asia.
Central Asia,
it's like, and, the Scythians had a whole culture of, of the cup. It's the Mongolians continue to have today. So the cup was the mother. It was the source. It was central to all rituals and so on. And it was it was the earth, and it was it was either impregnated by or united to the heaven energies. And you find this also in Taoism, with the cauldron and the heavenly energies and the earthly energies and the elixirs and the bringing the water down below the fire and all this sort of thing. So the Grail in Europe, they've never been able to figure out what the root of the word Graal is. They think they think that Sang is the saint, saint or holy, which is where Holy Grail is the translation of Sang Graal.
Right.
But Sang is a word that's used for invocation in shamanic ceremonies in Mongolia today.
In the steppes. Okay,
yes.
in Mongolia.
Even today.
Okay,
but it goes way back.
Okay.
And Graal is it's Garal, and it means source.
Yeah.
Or if it's pronounced Garel, but it's spelled with the I and the E are the same letter in Mongolian. If it's pronounced Garel, it's light. It means light. So it's the source. It's light. It's it's all consistent.
Yeah, it's part of a shamanic or
it's a shamanic
spiritual understanding of
spiritual
things.
understanding.
Yeah,
it's sort of the original spiritual understanding.
Yeah.
And my family tradition is the Grail, and one of my ancestors was Sir Thomas Malory, who wrote the Morte d'Arthur, which is about in the 15th century, which is about the King Arthur and
the Holy Grail.
Knights of the Round Table going after the Holy Grail.
The Templars are involved in that?
The Templars came later, and that's another subject.
Yeah.
Meaning there was some connection.
Glastonbury, there's a connection with Glastonbury.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And so what I wanted to say is that a lot of the crop circles appear around Glastonbury.
Is that true? More than in other parts of
Which
England?
happens to be next to Stonehenge. So people mention Stonehenge all the time. They don't mention Glastonbury.
Glastonbury, I thought it was up north of that.
No,
and
it's
Stonehenge
southwest.
In Devon,
it's in Somerset.
Somerset. Yeah, okay. I didn't realize. Glastonbury's down there. Okay,
it's right next to Avebury and Stonehenge.
Aylesbury. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course Glastonbury is the place that Joseph of Arimathea came to after Jesus Christ was crucified and entombed in Joseph's tomb, because Joseph was Jesus' uncle, we know from the apocryphal Gospels.
Okay.
And he was given, Pontius Pilate gave him the body to bury, so he took him to his family tomb, and it's from there that Jesus, arises and he's resurrected.
Is that right? I'm not that from. Okay.
But anyway, Joseph came. He was a tin trader.
Okay.
And so for many years, and he was very wealthy. He had been importing tin from Cornwall and Somerset to the Holy Land, and they went
Cyprus, maybe.
They went. They went down the Loire River across France, and then they sailed across the Mediterranean.
Really?
And of course, the stories in Somerset go that he brought his nephew Jesus with him on a trip or several trips during those years that Jesus disappeared, that we don't know anything about him, which would make sense. And even there's the famous Blake poem, and I have such a terrible memory, but it speaks about those holy feet who walked over here.
Okay.
And it's a reference to Jesus Christ having been in that part of the world.
You've been doing a lot of research since last week.
So what happens is that then after Joseph comes to Glastonbury and establishes the first church.
This at the level of...
And this is historical, by the way.
This is historically and
it's historical.
By something other than
he established the first church there before the Vatican was established in Rome.
The one that was close to Jesus?
Yes.
You're talking about?
His uncle.
That's verified by historical records other than legends and so on?
Yes.
Really?
Now, what hasn't been verified is whether he brought the cup of the Last Supper.
Okay.
So that's
how it got associated with Glastonbury.
Yes.
I see. Okay.
So it is said that he brought the cup of the Last Supper, and that it was the same cup that received the water and the blood from Jesus' side when Longinus stuck a spear in it. And that's that hasn't been verified, but. A lot of history hasn't been verified.
Yeah, I know,
so,
right. No, I understand that.
It's one of those things.
But the crop circles are associated with that, and then
the crop circles
the
are all around there.
existence of the crop circles are indicating, you've been doing, this is very interesting, but are associated with this different idea of consciousness or something, and does it relate to UFOs or something like that, or extraterrestrial influences on this
a lot
planet,
of people
or
think
why? And maybe I'm steering you wrong. If you want to go, that's very interesting about Glastonbury and everything. But you were talking about...
It is holy ground,
okay,
in that sense. Okay, and there were Druids, and it's a place of Avalon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like Avalon. You know, the Druids actually became Christians because they had a god named Isis.
Okay.
Yes, and so when Jesus came, they just assumed, for them it was just the next step in whatever, you know, they considered to be their religion.
Yeah, we're talking...
and they called themselves the Chaldees, and
the
they
Stonehenge
became the
goes back, and the Druids go back to how far back? Is it megalithic? Is it 2000 BC that there were things there? Or are we familiar? Maybe we're not.
I think it's not quite that bad. And then the Druids, we don't... the Celts didn't come that far back.
Okay.
But there were original people there before.
Okay, yeah.
And the Druids, but the Celts came from Central Asia.
Yeah, right. Okay.
You see?
Yeah.
So, you know, in these oral cultures, sometimes you have traditions that last for thousands of years because, you know, they don't get written down. So people put a lot of store on memory.
Absolutely.
And the Druids were they did not believe in writing any of the sacred teachings down.
Did they have writing?
Well, they used Greek writing and Roman writing. It's like they were very erudite, but they never put anything down because they felt that that the most important thing to develop if you became a druid or a bard or an ovate was your memory.
Okay, right.
Because the memory is
the
more
oral
reliable
tradition.
than paper.
Yeah.
You know?
McClone used to talk about that. Yeah, right. Okay.
So anyway, so it's a part of the world that is sort of saturated with all kinds of holy mysteries,
right?
Sacred lands,
right?
Does that have something to do with the crop circles?
Yeah, right.
Well, you know, we don't know, but it's, you know,
but you've been interested in the crop circles. That's what took you to the meeting where Mr. Mitchell was.
Well, I went. That's
when
I went.
In him also, but the crop circles are saying, you said 20% were not understood by tricksters or something.
Colin Andrews said that that at least 20% of them are not, that they were able to prove. He actually, for 2 years, he had a grant from Lawrence Rockefeller, I believe it was, and he actually hired detectives, and they followed all of the known. They call them They used to call them the hoaxers.
Yeah.
Around, and they you know, investigated this, and they came to the conclusion that 20% of them, at least 20% of them, could not have been made by men.
Well, that's interesting. Okay. Different than saying they can't prove that the others were made by men.
No, that they could not have been, because
they could not have been,
because there were no tracks. There were no, you know, it's like people had been there 5 minutes before, and there was
nothing.
And
if they're not made by men, they seem to have a characteristic indicated intelligence. And if it wasn't by man, who made them?
Even the ones who are being made by men, because they're still making them. Yeah. The people who make them consider that they're receiving, you know, instructions from someplace else, and so this is interesting.
Well, whether it gets to the idea, it seems to me some of the crop circles.
Or they say, I don't know why. I don't know why I'm going out and doing these circles. You know, I just have an urge to do it, and I go do it.
Yeah, there's probably people who don't even know about crop circles, but these are displays that are made there.
Well, what they are is that they're these elaborate. They started out being just circles, some years ago, I guess back in the 70s or so. But now some of them are quite elaborate geometric designs, and most of them have circles, which is why they're called circles. And they appear in...
beautiful designs, yeah.
They appear in fields of wheat, corn, all kinds of things. And apparently the farmers get very angry because it destroys some of their... and then people come and trample the rest of their crops.
Right.
But anyway, so
there are people who are trying to say that's representative of things done by extraterrestrials. That's one thing being advanced by some of our New Age brethren.
Some people are saying that. And other people are saying it's the energies of consciousness, or it's messages to us, or it's ways of imprinting our brains, or whatever. Now, and they've also seen orbs, you know, like little orb type things around
in the design, you mean?
No, moving around the crop circles, like when they're being formed
created?
And so on. Yeah.
You mean they've got film of that being happening?
They have some film.
They do have film
like
of that, and where do they show?
They show like little balls, shiny balls moving around. You know.
And is that done in daylight, or is that done at night, or is it done?
They're mostly done at nighttime.
Nighttime, okay. And
sometimes in the daylight.
How do they explain that? Those photographs.
Edgar Mitchell said, and this is very interesting. He said he thinks that those are cloaking devices.
Oh, they're what?
Cloaking devices.
What does that mean? Hiding or invisible?
Yeah, a cloaking device, where you're able to make something invisible, but maybe one little part is still visible or something.
Okay, cloaking is a thing that comes out of science fiction and that, but it does exist. They have these technologies where they could do it.
Well, we have cloaking devices,
Does Edward Mitchell think that this has something to do with a liaison with extraterrestrial life forms?
Well, he didn't say anything about the circles per se, but what he did say, which was most interesting, it turns out that he grew up in Roswell.
No kidding.
Yes.
That's a big UFO place. Yeah, right.
I mean,
right.
That's where in the 40s, 47 was it?
Right.
The two spacecraft presumably crashed, and they found all kinds of things, and then the government said it was weather balloons. But then Jesse Marcel, who was the officer from the base who went there, before he died, he said no, that this was material that had not been made on Earth, and he had taken some of it home, and his child had played with it, and all this sort of thing. And then he told this whole story about how he'd been told not to talk about it.
Right.
So he didn't for many years.
Yeah.
But then I think he died, and I think before he was dying, I think I saw a video of him talking.
Okay.
Anyway,
so you've been looking
Mitchell,
into this stuff and going to meetings about it and everything.
Edgar Mitchell started, and he's this very sort of, he speaks a very scientific language.
Yes,
he doesn't sound like a New Age or anything.
Right.
And basically he started out saying, look, he said, we need to put all of this in context for the young people who don't remember all of this, what's happening today.
Right.
And then he said, we need to remember, he said, in my lifetime, he said, my grandparents actually went west in a covered wagon in the late 19th century. He said, my parents were alive at the time the Wright brothers, made their first flight. And he said, I actually walked on the moon.
Right.
So he said, this happened
Something's happening here.
Within a period of 100 years.
Something's happening here and you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones? Yeah.
So he said, people need to, when we're looking for so many answers for things, we need to understand that we have moved so quickly.
Yeah, exponentially.
The last 150 years that we're just at the tip of the iceberg. So we're just starting to learn about everything that's coming. And then then he spoke about Roswell, and he said that because he grew up there, he said his father was a well-known cattle rancher there, and they were rather well off.
Right.
And he said, I didn't pay too much attention to it. I was in high school when this happened, but I still have the newspapers about it. And he said, as time went on, he said, I would come back to visit the family, and he said, I became, this great big astronaut with a reputation and so on. And he said, in recent years, he said, the older folk who were involved with the Roswell thing have been coming to me and saying that they want to share their story before they die of what really happened.
Came to him.
They come to him.
Okay.
Asking him.
People who've had experience. Yeah.
The people, and he said the people like the undertakers, the coffin makers, the people in the hospital and so on. He said, because we knew everybody. He said, it's a small place, and you just know everybody. And we knew the people on the bases.
Right.
And he said, these people have been coming to me, and they've all given me their part of the story. And he said, it's real. It's real. Okay,
let's see.
These were extraterrestrials.
What's the it's? Okay, there you said something. Okay,
so,
that's it. So this isn't the UFO. And he actually said that to you? He said that.
He said that. And apparently he did a radio interview in England last year on a BBC or something. I don't know. It was some radio interview, which I hadn't heard. So this to me was news.
Right.
And he said that he had actually in the past few months, he went to the Pentagon and he spoke to high-level people there because, he has a lot of credibility.
Of course,
this is a major guy,
Yeah, right.
I mean, he's a scientist. He's got a PhD in aeronautics and all kinds of stuff.
And has been on the moon.
Been on the moon.
Not a small matter, yeah.
So he said he went to the Pentagon and he spoke with people there, and they confirmed that, yes, this is true. And he said he expects that in the near future, he said we, he didn't say who the other people are, we're pushing. He said, I expect that in the near future the government is going to come out with and disclose all of this.
Wow, that would be a big thing. Now what he's saying, and then the other fellow you were talking about back about Glastonbury, that's where you went to and all that. And so the assumption, or what comes out of that in the minds of many people is that there are people from other civilizations
Yeah.
or something
Yeah.
that are liaising with this consciousness on
Well,
this
he
planet.
also said...
Is that a correct assumption?
That's
that a lot
correct.
of people are coming
and
to assume?
the way he ended the
It's
context...
a huge thing, yeah.
The way he ended the part about the context of, his grandparents to him, and he said, and then he went on and he said,
This Mitchell now.
Mitchell,
Yeah.
Edgar Mitchell.
Yeah.
He said, a star of the type of the sun has so many, billion years of life, and,
Yeah.
and we're about halfway through. And he said, so eventually we will have to leave the Earth.
Well, okay.
And that's sort of a prelude to saying, okay, there are other people who've had to leave their home planets.
Okay.
In the universe.
Okay.
I mean, that was the assumption.
One of the things you could ask those who are like that, if people have had experiences, first of all, that would put you into a different kind of stat. If you saw something happen to you, but then nobody's going to believe you, that's an interesting. The other thing is that if it's the case that somebody is coming here to our third planet in this particular solar system from another place in the universe, why, some people would ask, the first outside of just, ancient times or something, but the first inkling of this happened just, say, less than the last 100 years or so. Why did they do it to where they're only revealing it in such a convoluted way, and why didn't they just come... People want some pattern out of the whole of the evolutionary process of which we're a part. There's a need to get some sort of a sense of what the hell's going on, because there's so much confusion with this exponential birthing mechanism that we're going through now. Some people call it the 12th Imam. Some people call the Messiah is coming. It's a big change, qualitative change, speciation, punctuated. Something's going. So they want something, and they would get somebody from outside. And why would it be, if there is an entity or a consciousness or something relating back to our system of evolution of consciousness on this particular planet and this particular solar system, why wouldn't they just come and reveal themselves and say, that's it? Why have it drung out for so long and so forth? Well, but it may be that it would be too much.
Did you ever watch Star Trek?
Of course, everybody
watched
Star Trek.
Whereby these people were forbidden from, revealing themselves to other planets because it wasn't time.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because it was... No, but you asked.
And maybe, and there's a theory that the reason they're beginning to reveal themselves is because we have the capability of blowing up the Earth, and it's going to affect other planets, not just ours. So.
Okay. Or that it might have been, like I just talked to Jane Goldberg. We were aired a couple of days before this thing, and referenced the poem by Emily Dickinson about dazzle gradually. The truth and its superb delight can only be shown. You can't demonstrate it too soon, or every man be blind. So that there's a process, and we're coming to a process, and maybe they're part of it, and they have to do this even if there are from another level of consciousness or something. That they would have to do it slowly, because it would be too overwhelming to have the truth of this other relationship to cosmos that would be intrinsic in the idea they're reaching out to us, and we could not handle it until we get, and now we're getting to where we're going to maybe be able to handle it, and so now maybe it's going to be able to...
I don't know that it's a matter of handling, but, but it might...
consciously.
Yeah, consciously.
I mean, it might be consciously, because that's, we're the system's breaking down as we evolve and so forth, and we don't have a system that relates to what we need for the future.
I remember seeing, there was a book that was published back in the 90s, I believe, in Europe, and it was of great paintings in Europe that had little, UFOs in them.
Yeah.
And it was like all, Renaissance paintings and medieval paintings, and, and they'd have these little, UFOs in them. And, so they've been appearing a long time. And when we think about angels and so on, it's like maybe we just used to call them angels, and I don't know. It's like, or maybe it's a lot of different things.
But that you say that he'd been there at the Pentagon, and they're maybe going to announce something about Roswell or something, or take a position, because they've been poo-pooing that it doesn't exist, and they're explaining it in terms of natural evolutionary processes out of which we're coming. We can understand it. We got institutions we can relate to, but that's coming from another level, and it would be, if that's a consciousness that's having effect here with these crop circles, or the noetic thing that he's talking about. Mr. Mitchell is very serious scientific. Maybe they can match the two. It would be a gigantic thing on in terms of the evolution of understanding on this
And by
planet.
the way, he
It
told
would
me,
have to be done slowly. It couldn't happen all at once.
by the way, I always talk about William Tiller, who's my model for a scientist working with, because he does...
Edward Teller?
No,
Tiller.
William Tiller.
William Tiller, sorry.
T-I-L-L-E-R.
I was thinking of the maker
William
of
Tiller,
the hydrogen bomb, yeah.
No, William Tiller was a physicist.
Okay.
He's a quantum physicist, and
Yeah.
he was the head of the Stanford Materials Research Department.
Okay.
So he was heavily into...
That's right. You had
I
put me
talked
in
about
touch
him.
with him, yeah.
He's been heavily into building rockets and, lethal weapons for the government.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he became interested in healing and consciousness and how this works.
Uh-huh.
And he's the one scientist who's doing all kinds of control studies that have to do with how the healing energy works and so on.
Okay. Uh-huh.
But anyway, it turns out I asked
Okay.
Edgar Mitchell, and he
Yeah.
works closely with him. So
Oh, really? With Tiller?
yeah,
Okay.
Tiller.
Yeah.
So there is a little group of scientists that is I would love to be around them, hang out with them.
You used to be very involved with things political. You were very involved. That book on Saddam Hussein was wonderful, I thought, in your treatment.
It still tells the story
tale of
straight.
him. Yeah, yeah.
That's
And you were
story.
involved with
nothing
Mr.
to
Sick, I
change.
think, and people on geopolitical questions and all of that. You've really been interested in a lot of different things. You've gotten interested in this other side of things over the last, 5, 6 years, or 10 years, maybe? Is it that long?
I guess it's been about 8 years.
About 8
now.
years,
Yeah,
okay.
uh-huh.
You got in. What is it that puts you over there and puts you into that rather than in the hardcore geopolitical reality thinking of geopolitics and all of that you were so adept at, reported on, and so forth?
Well, I guess
a big shift in
I
terms of
started
your
out. I started out
focus.
working on writing about foreign countries,
you
Middle
did.
East, Central America, and so on, because I was interested in conflict. And it finally dawned on me that the problem is here, not over there.
Here being the United States of
United
America?
States.
Yeah. Well, we're the
So-
keeper of the flame of the historical traditions. We got all the power in
Exactly.
our hands.
So then I spent 7 years working on that book about the militia movement here.
Yes, you did. The shooting
And
edge.
I
It's
had
still
a real
able to be
education.
published, if
Yeah,
you
it's
could. But you
I
lost
put it all in
interest
storage.
it.
Well,
Yeah.
it was like taking poison every day to find out all these terrible things about this government and
the system,
and so on.
Yeah.
Meaning, I knew that it was terrible, but I didn't know it was that terrible.
Yeah. Okay.
And and then at a certain point, I was, nobody wanted to publish it because
Yeah.
it was about the militia,
and
they're supposed to be extremists and so
Yeah,
on. And,
right.
it's not politically correct. Although their educational effort of getting stuff out about Federal Reserve and so on
right.
has been taken up by the left, and the
Yeah.
left doesn't know that. Most people don't know that came as a result of the militia efforts to educate the people.
Okay. Yeah.
So
That's
when
the
they were saying
Zeitgeist,
that
the
people,
Zeitgeist film and that kind of stuff now. It's out. Yeah, on the Federal Reserve. Okay. Yeah.
all that kind of information.
Jekyll Island and all that.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, but anyway, I got to the point where I realized I can't get it published, and then everything fell apart in my life.
Yeah, that was personally.
Yeah, personally
Okay, yeah.
too. And I just sat there and I said, the world really needs healing more than facts. We don't need any more facts. The facts are all out there for anyone who wants to,
Right.
see them. They're all
Right.
over the internet. They're all over everywhere.
Right.
But we
Yeah,
live in
the
a
internet was
society where
coming in.
people only read things that they already agree about,
Right.
for the most part.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That's a niche society.
Yeah,
People
right.
don't, it's not like, even in the 70s, there were books, a book would come out that would be controversial,
Yeah.
and people would read it from the left and the right and so on.
Yeah.
And now it's like people only read things that they agree with.
Right. Yeah, and it's getting very polarized.
It's very polarized.
The politics and all
So
that.
I thought, because I also realized, it's like consciousness is the key and
Okay.
the energy.
Okay.
And we need to learn to work with that. And we are learning, but
Yeah, lots
and,
going on.
and in a very interesting way, it's like a recapitulation of the shamanistic methods is what's
Okay.
going to propel us forward.
Okay.
Which is why I'm interested in the origin of the Grail
Yes.
being with shamanism in
Okay.
Central Asia. You
Yeah.
see,
Uh-huh.
because it's the original spiritual healing methods and divination methods and so on that we need to recapitulate and thrust forward with them.
And instantiate, perhaps, in a
That's where we're going to find. That's where we're going to
sociological-
find a lot of the resources for moving forward.
Spencer Wells did a really good thing. I think he's going to re-air it on public television now. The Journey of Man, I don't know if you saw it, had to do with the movement of mankind out of Africa.
Yeah, that was about 10 years ago or something.
Yeah, it was. I mean, they're going to re-air it, I believe. I saw it on PBS.
I don't have television anymore.
Oh, well, I do. I depend on television.
I went from being a news junkie to, I just don't, and
oh, that's okay, yeah.
And nothing happens. I mean, it's like...
No, I disagree with you. I think television's fantastic. They got fantastic stuff on top. And I think multimedia is coming and everything, so I'm in touch with that. I want to be in touch. But anyway, he's going to re-air it, and it had to do with that there was a movement out of Africa. We all come from Africa 200,000 years ago. There was a major movement that was, and that there was a stasis for a long time, and that Europe certainly, and much of the world, well, in what is now current-day Kazakhstan.
Well, you see,
and we moved the early Homo sapien moved into Europe from Kazakhstan.
If we can,
and that's what the mitochondria shows.
Move into Europe from Kazakhstan.
But we were about 10,000 years in Kazakhstan.
Before we went to Europe.
Before the move to Europe, and there was also a branch that went. So it's all shown scientifically, linguistically, and mitochondria. Mm-hmm. And then finally 10 to 12,000 years ago, they crossed the Bering Strait.
There's the other tradition.
But that's what I'm saying. If the Grail is in the steppes or in the there, that's where we were as humanity for a long time. There was a 10,000-year break between when they should have been there in Europe and when they did actually arrive, the Cro-Magnon.
There is a tradition in India that the Vedas and so on came from people from the north.
Yeah, right. And
if you look at the Vedas, but they had to have come from the North Pole, close to the North Pole.
I don't understand North Pole.
Well, because they talk about months of darkness and months of light and so on. And so, if you read that carefully...
Well, Kazakhstan's pretty far up there.
No. Hyperborea is farther up.
Okay.
No, Kazakhstan is not that far north. It's sort of at the southern part of Siberia.
Yeah.
It's like at that level, It's like you have to go pretty far up, like to Greenland, where I went.
Yeah, you were in Greenland.
You have to go above the Arctic Circle.
Strange places. You were out there looking for the Mother Earth or something, or Mother Greenland or Mother Iceland.
Well, I went there to do a Grail ceremony.
Yeah, that's right. That was Grail.
But
you've
anyway,
been focused on that Grail, and now you say the Grail may have roots in the steppes or in Central Asia.
That's where the roots are.
That's new. I hadn't heard that.
That's where the new roots.
And this thing you're wearing, this gold thing on your brooch,
this is a Scythian gold piece from Central Asia.
Not from that time, but
it's a copy.
It's a copy of the design that they got with good evidence.
It's a copy of a piece that's in the Hermitage Museum in Russia.
Okay.
That they found on the steppes.
Right. Okay.
And.
Well, that's what we're saying. I'm saying humanity in its was for a very long time, around 50,000 years ago, was Kazakhstan, or in that area.
But anyway, the whole point, if we can establish that there have been extraterrestrial
that's another
coming,
another realm that would be.
If they came in 1947, then maybe we will be able to substantiate some of these theories that people have that there have been many visitations by extraterrestrials, and that in fact we were either engineered by them or we're a mixture of them and sort of some proto-humans. I don't know, but I'm fascinated by all that because I want to see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. We all want to know where the future is.
We may find out that the Grail tradition comes from, from another star system or something.
Those are all things that get into science fiction.
But anyway, that's science fiction.
Yeah, but one can understand where, if this was taking place and we were liaisoning, Mr. Sagan and SETI, they've been reaching out with radio telescopes, Arecibo, trying to get some sense of a connection with another intelligent thing. If there was some from somewhere out there, would have to be vastly intelligently advanced or technologically advanced, and maybe successfully negotiated in their system that which we're going through now, where we have weapon systems that are species lethal. For the first time in 200,000 years,
and
we're getting to a point of transformation that we can't allow the old. So they're going to intervene, but they would have to intervene very slowly or dazzle gradually, because it would be so momentous to human consciousness.
Well, you see, I don't think so.
If that was announced, there is an intelligence from outer space that is now found manifestation within the Earth. and we now say it is true. Obama said it's true. I've seen the evidence, it is true. That would shake up the world like nothing else imaginable. And we had to be primed for something like that.
I don't think so. I think we can handle it just fine.
Okay,
I think it would be great if we found out that that this is not all there is. You know, these governments that we have.
Yeah, because the governments suck, or the governments don't. The governments, or
But you see, that's
poor,
why
puny human beings don't have. The change is so comprehensively appropriate. They don't have. They're so linked into a historical pattern that's being transformed.
No, we're not linked in. The power structure is linked in.
That's what I mean.
The power structure would lose all of its credibility immediately if there's something superior to this power structure.
That's what happens when you have a
So it's the power structure that doesn't want us mortals to know about this.
Right. Well, exactly. You know, and humanity, or in the operation of the broader system.
I think that
so it'd be like
it
would be like something in the desperation. Because, you see, it's like 200,000 years we've been here, and we've only reached that point where we can now destroy the entire species just maybe 20, 30 years ago. And now we have that capability. We have a capability to where we can wipe out conscious evolution in this part of the universe, and we don't, and we're tied to systems that are outdated, coming out of a situation that's been changed on the positive side, and we don't have any way of relating to that because we're all anchored to history. And so the time is now to start having this intervention from a system, like a pattern recognizing. We're one system in a larger pattern that can be recognized. They're fooling, well, they're not there yet, but they're almost there. And then if they did, that would be a gigantic thing, and a lot of people would hope that might be the case because there's so little faith in the human beings putting together.
A lot of people would hope that it's a solution. Now, what we don't know, there are probably good ones and bad ones, you know, in quotation marks.
Well,
so they're probably
got all that written out
good
in
extraterrestrials. Meaning they're obviously not. Meaning if they're anything
like
us,
to eat us.
They may, or maybe
they need feed.
Maybe there's some of them here to eat us. There's some that like. I mean, who knows?
Yeah,
you know?
but
it's probably a bit of everything.
Yeah,
like us.
yeah.
You know, just because somebody's a human doesn't mean that he's going to give you some food if you're hungry.
No, we got good and evil. We got black and white. We got all those kind of things.
So the extraterrestrials are probably like that,
Well,
too.
It's interesting that you're talking to Mr. Mitchell like that and doing that, and it is an interesting time to be alive and conscious. And if something's coming out of all that, it's been poo-pooed for so long.
Well, if somebody
covered up.
When somebody like that says this, it's different from when somebody
like Mitchell.
Yeah.
Somebody
because it has a different.
And it would be something else if it was Mr. Obama gave an address to the whole world.
No, it's
No.
Yeah.
Let's just say.
Yeah, but he's not going to.
No. They haven't. They didn't. They wouldn't. They could have. In 1947,
why would he do that?
They could. Well,
no.
I don't know.
But why would Obama do that?
Well,
he would immediately lose his.
He would lose
power.
his credibility with all the systems that have to be trained. But it would also give the meaning for there
would be no more reason for having a president.
Well, it might be a meaning for having a real qualitative transformation that would not be just reifying outdated institutions, notions of human nature, knowledge, and everything. But it's all building up now to where it would be that sort of grace, a moment of grace that would make it so that we're not going to blow it all up over things like Israel.
He may become the vehicle of something for something. But,
well, I'm just saying if it did, and there's been people believing in that, and then if we're going to blow it up because Israel can't come back from settlements, they're going to let off 200 atomic bombs, and they're still going to be playing the old game, or Kashmir, or something, or Iran's going to get it, and we're going to blow up the whole thing. So there would be an intervention like grace from on high that would prevent us from doing that. Or if we can't seem to find the way of getting through to where we've maybe transcended material scarcity in terms of everybody being able to participate in this system evolving on a course like that, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence of them being able to come up with a system other than reifying the outdated institutions that we interrelate by. Do you understand?
So maybe we'll get some new institutions from somewhere else.
From outer space. We laugh and all, but it might be, and it makes sense that it would be. That would be something that couldn't have been laid. You couldn't have laid that on the people in 1947. They would say, how the hell does the mind work? They didn't know such things as neurotransmitters. They didn't know about anything. They didn't know quantum. They didn't know any string theory.
I don't think people would
They didn't have a knowledge base to handle it. That's what I'm saying.
But they
were too ignorant.
That's not what Edgar Mitchell said was the reason that they
what
kept
did he
secret.
say?
And this was very interesting, too, because what he said really made sense. He said in 1947, when Roswell happened, he said, the CIA no longer, we were just coming out of World War II.
That's right.
And there was a confusion about, whether the Russians, or the not Russians, and, it's like, there was a big sensitivity about, enemies and war and so on.
Right.
And he said there was no CIA because it had been disbanded.
They'd been the OSS.
The OSS had been disbanded, but the CIA hadn't been created yet.
Right, okay.
And he said, and so everything was sort of in an interim situation.
47, right?
In 47.
Right, yeah.
He said, so there was a lot of confusion about what to do. And he said as far that his understanding was that that's the reason it was put under secret, because nobody knew what to do with the information and so on, because we were just coming out of a war and there weren't any institutions to deal with it and so on.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Which makes all sense. So it just happened to get, become a classified thing.
Well, then that might fit into the extraterrestrial sense of when the time was right.
Exactly.
That would fit right in. That would fit.
Yeah, because remember we had just...
Our lame efforts to get
we had
things
just
together.
used the nuclear weapons.
That's right. That might have been a signal. Yeah, that kind of thing. So we can postulate all this stuff. Yeah. But what happens if none of this stuff with the Grail and the thing and the shamans and the thing and that, and there is no, and SETI's come up with nothing yet. We have no evidence of anything except probability theory.
Well, but the evidence is there. No, but the whole point is Edgar Mitchell says that the Pentagon does have, that there's no, that the Rosalind thing was real.
Well, okay.
I mean, if that isn't evidence, I don't know what is.
Okay, so why...
That there were these creatures who landed in these, and they have the UFOs, and they have the bodies of these creatures.
Okay, well
I call them creatures because I don't know what
and
to call them.
And then there's a whole conspiracy theory gone up that the power brokers that want to control everything won't let that out because it would violate their claim to power. And the same thing that it would
undermine their
Kennedy was shot from a grassy knoll, and the World Trade Centers were brought down by an Illuminati bunch of bastards who are running it. And there's all these conspiracy things built up around the thing. Why they, the power structure, keep it from us what the truth is and that kind of stuff. And the UFO is just sort of thrown in with terrorism or something, right? I mean, is that where it comes down to? Is that mundane?
No,
but if it's true, if they say, when he says, Mr. Mitchell says the Pentagon has not just a rumor.
Evidence.
They don't have a rumor. They don't have a rumor.
They have the proof.
Do they have the proof that Mr. Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy? Do they have the proof that the World Trade Centers were brought down by the United States government? They have the proof?
Of course we have the proof.
Proof.
Of course we
do.
Yeah.
So there's part of a conspiracy theory, the UFO, and the idea that we're in touch with an outer...
Well, the conspiracy is to keep it silent.
That's right. Okay, and that's the conspiracy, and that's because people feel very, very upset by the fact that it's blowing in the wind a huge thing, a huge transformation can be sensed at a certain level that we're going through. Like we're about to have the water break in an evolutionary process. We've been gestating. It's about to leave. We want to know what the hell's going on, and they're keeping it from us.
That's why the glaciers are melting. Because
the glaciers, you're up there talking about Mother Earth glaciers.
The Mother Earth's water breaking.
Right. Okay. That's
figuratively speaking. Yeah.
But then the
we're about to give birth to a new Earth.
We're about to give birth to a new Earth, except if we have this outside influence like the Grail, or not the Grail, that would be coming out of a shamanic tradition of trying to understand what the hell this world's about. We have a reflective conscience. We can see we're in front of a fire 30,000 years ago. What's it about? How did all this stuff get to be here? They're going to clone a mastodon. Did you see that?
No.
They got it to where they can clone a mastodon. Ponds just came up, Fleischmann ponds on 60 Minutes. They reported cold fusion may be actually real. That'd be the end of the energy crisis.
I never had any doubts that it was real and I read all the articles.
You had energy. You didn't have doubts then. They trashed it for about 10 years or so.
People trash everything.
But do you think that's true? So maybe
I never thought that. I never doubted that it was real.
But people sense that now, and then we don't have institutions or anyone who's articulating that qualitative pattern transformation that's going on now out of history just within our own context.
Okay, well, that's what Edgar Mitchell...
So we have to have things to reach out to.
That's what Edgar Mitchell was trying to do.
Wait a minute. We have to have things to reach out to. We either have to have a conspiracy group, the Illuminati or the gang, that controls everything, and they're so nasty and evil that they're going to control everything for themselves, the bankers or whoever it is now, the Council on Foreign Relations, this kind of thing. Or then that's within the context of history as we understand it. But then when you bring up the crop circles and the outer... You're talking about from another element above the whole human experience as we understand it, just historically evolving and coming to a thing. So that's a whole different ball of wax.
I think that's fascinating when Edgar Mitchell...
Because if you're projecting, we do it.
Listen to this.
All right, but I want to finish one last thing. If we're projecting it, we're going to be able to get it together, and we may be coming to a point where we will have to have a system where you've got universal justice and the pathway to universal justice. Everybody is going to be included. No, all of the history of nightmare, that history is a nightmare that James Joyce talked about. We're going to have a liberated condition for humanity and the ecology. We have to, if we can work it out, we're going to reach that. Otherwise, we're going to blow it up. That's just coming out of history. So they're looking for something, but the resonancy of our having got that together will interaccommodate us to the universe, but we won't know that until we get out of the womb. So we're going to be synergistic. If we do make it and we liberate, we have a liberation of the entire evolution of consciousness, get a punctuated equilibrium, we're at a time of coming into a new relationship to the cosmos, but it's not something out there that's doing that. It's something we realize when we get there. That's different than having something out there who's going to make it available to us, the understanding that they've tried to write into our spiritual
We may
traditions.
have come from out there.
Well, that's another issue.
You know.
But did you understand what I said?
There are some pretty scientific theories that we used to live on Mars, and that Mars became uninhabitable, and we moved to the Earth too.
I've never seen that.
Yeah,
but okay, if you say
there.
So. Yeah. Well, there's things in the realm of science fiction. Yeah.
No, this is no longer.
Okay,
this is coming out of the realm of science fiction.
So anyway, but
this has to do with the recent discoveries.
So would you put Mr. Mitchell saying that the Pentagon knows that Roswell was really extraterrestrials, if I heard you say that, the same as the people who say we know that thermite brought the World Trade Centers down? It would be like that. It's like a conspiracy of hiding the truth, and because it's too overwhelming, right?
No, not because it's too overwhelming. Because it's a conspiracy to hide the truth. Because
I'm sorry. I was putting it in the realm of just hiding the truth by the power structure that we understand historically. They're bastards who run the world. They keep their power. All they care about themselves. They're evil or whatever thing you want to do and everything. That's one way. The other way is entering into a force short of the spiritual, about God or something, or the legends that we have lived by and everything like that, but you're short of that there are actual contact with civilizations or entities or consciousness that is out in the broad, vaster universe. That would be, when you say so adroitly, Pentagon knows that those were extraterrestrials. That's a huge thing beyond just the normal.
That's huge, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That's huge.
And he did say that? You didn't misinterpret him?
No.
He's willing to say that?
He said it publicly.
That
it was being taped.
Okay.
And there were like 100 people there.
So that goes back to your understanding of
and they said that he had, that he did a broadcast last year in England where he, went over all of this, so... He's on record publicly.
And is that coming out of the Noetic Institute and so forth?
He's the head of the Institute of Noetic Sciences.
Does this thinking about consciousness and that we're in touch with a broader universe, an intelligence other than legend or other than God or something like that we're in touch with it in a way that these are representatives of that? And is that part of the assumption of the people at the Noetic Institute, Mr. Mitchell, that is in fact the case?
That what is the case?
That there have been extraterrestrial contact with consciousness from systems outside our own.
Well, it's his interpretation. But what I wanted to say is that I think it's fascinating that he says that the orbs, and because now there's all this thing about taking pictures of orbs and so on.
I don't know what you're talking about. The cloaking, you called it. Or something.
He said he thinks it's a cloaking device.
Okay, well,
and he said it's beyond anything that we have on Earth. So it's a cloaking device of visitors. And
that's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
So he's making this point.
Meaning, they're either from outer space or from another dimension or whatever, but it's like they're visitors from another reality or another place or something.
Well, that seems to me different than that there's people who brought the World Trade Centers down from Washington.
Yeah, but don't mix that in with this.
That's like part of a conspiracy. Or somebody shot Mr. Kennedy besides Oswald.
Okay, but that's a whole other program.
Those are conspiracy theories coming out of history.
You're talking about conspiracies. I'm not.
Yeah, but they're lumping the UFO contact with outer terrestrial people.
Yeah, but
will link that in with conspiracy theories, who are so paranoid or so whatever about the world that they think they're. That's why I started talking about Susan Boyle. Susan Boyle came out and she sang a song, And the consciousness of the people. The biggest program I understand, you don't watch television. I don't either watch this television, but they have a thing called American Idol. And everybody's walking around thinking they've got the song that's going to change the whole world. And the thing that's in the vibe is we're in such a tension moment when it's so qualitatively different. The economy's breaking down. We got a capability. And if only they could hear me, nobody will listen to me. But if we could do it, and Susan Boyle walks out on the stage and sings a song from Les Miserables, and it goes all over the world. She's the biggest thing in the world now. A little 6-minute clip where she sang a song. And now the world has now recognized her.
What does that have to do with the whole conversation that we've been having?
Well, it has to do with the fact that people long for that conscious understanding of what the hell is going on, and why won't they listen to the people who have an understanding of what's really important? Why do we not really have a lodestar, this notion that Mr. Mitchell has, that we have been contacted by outer solar system consciousness, and have that be a lodestar of everything that we're thinking about, rather than calling it something like a Kennedy assassination conspiracy cover-up by the power structure out of history.
It is a cover-up.
It's beyond out of history.
No, but it has been covered up. You mean Roswell? If that's not a cover-up, I don't know what is.
But don't you understand the difference between covering up for something you can understand by a particular power structure, covering its ass, or a bureaucrat or something doing that within the system of history as we understand it, and then something that's asserting not that this power structure did something evil in order to cover up their ass or to get power or something like that. We can understand it. Napoleon or something. We can understand it out of history. But you're talking about covering up the fact that we have been in touch with a system outside of our historically understood system.
Well, but of course,
we don't have anything else besides flying saucers that do that,
we know, except
the legends of religion.
But the whole thing is, it's like you and I don't know everything else that entails. Meaning we don't know how much, has the government had meetings with these people? What are they covering?
Right.
Meaning there's a whole lot of things that may be covered up that we don't know about.
Yeah.
So, it could be incredibly enormous.
Right. It could be like if the water's about to break and we're about to become liberated, rather than we're all like serfs on a feudal estate picking up.
But maybe we're about to become food for them.
Maybe
like
Soylent Green. We could go back and get Soylent Green. Yeah, we got. Well, that's
how do we know?
Yeah, but listen, honey, we could have been living in the 5th century or 6th century, and it took 1,000 years to invent a tack. Every day they're going to clone a mastodon. They're going to have the energy problem. It'll be the end of the energy problem if the cold fusion works. They put it on 60 Minutes. There's this coming. There's that coming. The economy's breaking down. It's such a time of qualitative tension and everything like that right now. And everybody thinks they've got the answer. If only they get my solar power business going and I get a good stream of income, everything's going to be okay. And all this. And so you get this Susan Boyle. It's really amazing.
If they're here to eat us, what kind of sauce do you want?
Well, I wonder.
On yourself.
Maybe you could get the contract.
Or do you want to be in a sandwich? Do you want to be sliced up and put into a sandwich?
Or
do you want to have gravy on you?
Or what? Yeah, okay. No, but what I'm saying
is... these are important questions.
Well, there is, there is the question. But that would be under their concern. But it may be... The point being
they may not choose us because they may say we only want young people.
Or maybe they would prefer pork. Maybe they prefer pork.
Maybe they don't like human flesh.
But I don't know, chicken or something. But I draw the line at eating people. But the point is that it's really an important and qualitative, transformative moment in which we live, and mostly people are caught up with the mundane things. How the hell am I going to pay the rent? And all these kind of things like they have to do out of history. Systems breaking down. And so you come up with this thing about Mr. Mitchell, and I'm glad that you went to that and brought you, and you're really researching all the Grail stuff, because these are some of the traditions. Maybe there's been some contact by some of these shamanistic people, or maybe some of the scientific proof of some of the spiritual traditions, Christianity, Judaism, Vedic, whatever, will be able to become utilized within a context where we can understand it and resonate with it in terms of our understanding things scientifically. So the breakdown between the scientific and the spiritual might break.
For Mitchell,
because that's where you are too.
Well, that's where Edgar Mitchell
you went away from understanding the things historically in the normal way to a larger context.
I want to say that there are a number of accounts on record that when we first went to the moon, it's like
69.
People like among the Eskimos and Native Americans, said to Western sort of industrial type people,
Yeah.
well, what's new about that? You know, my uncle goes to the moon all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and it's, you know, shamanically.
Yeah.
And it's a fact that some of the traditional shamans,
Yeah.
at least in the past,
Uh-huh.
were able to go places and actually describe them.
Uh-huh.
You know.
Yeah, well, you're talking
in
about.
spirit.
You're talking about.
You know, so when those people, you know, went to the moon and described it and so on. I mean, they would go to another city and describe where you lived and your house and everything. So, if they went to the moon and could describe it, then what? You know, then maybe it wasn't our first times on the moon.
Okay, well, it makes it very uncomfortable if we're living within the normally understood thing. They only let Galileo off the hook about 10 years ago for telling us that we're not the center of the universe because we had a lot of creation stories.
Yeah, but we went from believing all of this to not believing it. Because,
yeah, we went maybe overboard.
Because at one time people did believe.
Well, we had the scientific. We were just talking about
Freud.
Freud.
People believed in angels and visitations and all kinds of things.
If you're sitting in front of a cave in the south of France, and how in the hell could all of this be here? You would come up with tales about how it does.
But no, they're not tales.
The
they're
secular smart-ass scientists.
They are real experiences.
Yeah. Okay.
Meaning, I'm telling you that it is possible for a person to go and look. To go and describe something on the other side of the world.
Okay.
And what do they call it? Remote view? They've actually proved this with remote viewing now. You know, this was done by the government.
They have morphic resonance. Rupert Sheldrake.
Yeah, but the remote viewing had to do with people actually describing places and things that were there and so on, which is different.
Okay.
The morphic resonance.
You mean
has
in
to do with the
ancient
field.
times or something?
No, I'm talking about now.
No. Okay. Yeah.
Remote viewing.
Remote viewing.
All over the place. There are all these books.
Like a television camera.
Harold Puthoff. And
I don't know
all
Puthoff.
There are all these. You know, it's like the CIA had this program.
Okay.
Of remote viewing, and they had all of these people, you know, sitting there with blindfolds on, describing, you know.
I haven't heard of that. Yeah.
Harold, it's.
I know. Well, the information is pouring in Niagara proportions
but this is
now.
a major thing now. Everybody knows about this.
No, I know not everyone, but
they even give
99% of the people have never heard of poofing. Or was it Poofin? or Munchausen? I don't know. But you say everybody knows it. They don't. But it's pouring in from all fields. It's like a Niagara of information, it seems to me.
Anyway,
now. What a time to be alive.
This is a government program. And they basically proved that, you know, that people could actually describe, you know, like they were using it to describe secret, I don't know, programs that the Russians were doing and so on.
Right, they did a lot of stuff in Russia and psychic,
Yeah, but I mean, this was an acknowledged program of the government.
Okay.
So you know, so in fact, if there were shamans who were able to walk on the moon without physically moving from here, their energy body or something, then. You know, this has been going on for a long time. That's pretty advanced, you know.
Well, there may be a linking up of the true qualities of some of those
things. So this is why I think, you know, we need to recapitulate the ancient shamanic methods of doing things because they really knew how to do a lot of the things that we think are pretty way out now.
Okay, that's good.
Because they were discredited, you know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when Descartes came in, it's like everything.
Yeah, I know. Well,
and that's
only in the last couple of minutes of the evolution of things.
Exactly.
So what a time to be alive, you know, and participate. Thanks, Nita, for keeping up, doing such very good research.